Hostas are a fantastic plant to grow in the garden. They're particularly good when grown in and around a body of water, but they're perfectly at home in a dappled, shady corner of the garden. There's so many different leaf shapes, forms and colours and shades to choose from. They're just a wonderful plant. The vast majority of the hosta species originate in Japan. It's always good to consider where a plant comes from before planting it in your garden. Hostas would really like a moisture retentive, free draining soil, but if you're growing them on a sandy soil or a heavy clay, it's worth bulking up the soil with some organic matter or some leaf mould. If you can provide them with a sheltered environment, something a bit moist and humid, then they'll really thrive for you. The ideal time to plant hostas is either early spring or autumn. You will really want to avoid the heat of the summer. Position them right and they're very low maintenance. They produce a mass of beautiful luscious foliage throughout the year and throw up these amazing spikes of scented blooms for you to enjoy. Towards the end of autumn and into winter, your hostas are going to start to die back a little, but don't worry, they'll be back in the spring for you to enjoy once again. This is the perfect aspect for growing a hosta. We've got a nice dappled light, shaded, secluded location. There's moisture retentive soil, so it's absolutely ideal. The other thing to consider when growing a hosta is the spacing. They look best when they're not crammed together. They need a little bit of room to move. So the ideal sort of spacing is about 70 to 75 centimetres apart. Having said that, you also get some really small cultivars of hosta too. So there's one called mouse ears, which, as the name suggests, very, very small little leaves, and then right up to much larger leaves like this Hosta Sieboldi. So I've got this lovely cultivar that's called wide brim, but unlike the name suggests, is actually quite a compact plant. I prepared the planting hole. I'm just going to get some peat-free compost that we're going to put in the bottom of the hole and fill in around the plant with. Just want to tap the plant out with a firm motion. You can see it's got a really nice root system, but you just want to sort of tease out those roots so that they grow out into that planting hole. Getting the level right is really, really important. So take some time just to make sure that the level of the top of the pot aligns with the top of the soil. I'm just using some of that compost around to mix in to the planting hole and just firm in really well. That's really important. You really want to firm the plant in so that there's contact with the soil. And then most importantly, give it a really good drink of water to settle it in. And that's going to grow away beautifully. So hostas can also be grown in pots. So if you don't have a garden, this is an ideal way to grow them. The important thing to consider is drainage. So having a large enough pot, making sure that you aid the drainage in the bottom of that pot, sort of use a crock, an old sort of broken piece of terracotta pot is ideal. So just covering up that hole to stop it from blocking up. The potting mix that I like to use is sort of 50-50 peat-free compost with loam or topsoil. What the topsoil in the mix is doing is providing a clay content that will help retain moisture in the soil. So that's really, really important when you're growing anything that wants a moisture retentive soil in a pot. Pots have a tendency to dry out a lot, so we need to hold that moisture in there for the plant. So I'm just filling up the pot. It's important to get the level right for the plant. So it's really important to firm in the compost really well so that it doesn't slump when you're watering it. This cultivar is called Halcyon, and it's a really beautiful sort of glaucous, large-leafed hosta. It's got a height of around 40 centimetres and a spread of around 70. So it will sit in this pot comfortably, probably for a couple of years before needing to pot it on. Just tap it out of its pot. Really lovely roots. Remembering to tease out those roots so that they grow out into the soil that we're going to put around it and backfill around the plant with the same mix. Okay, so I'm just firming in to eliminate any pockets of air. You want really good contact with the roots when you're planting anything, whether it's in the ground or in a pot, really. Always remember to keep an eye on the height of the finish in the pot, because you don't want to bury the plant too deep. And it's a really good idea to leave a little lip so that when you're watering, the water doesn't flow out of the pot. And then it's really important to give it a good drink of water. So if you want to propagate your hostas, it's best to do so before the leaves have unfurled in early spring. So there'll be a big sort of fat, juicy spike of a bud poking out from the soil, and that's the point at which you want to sort of attempt to propagate. It's very easily done. So you essentially want to be able to cut down the centre between the buds, making sure that you've got at least one good juicy bud and some root. And you can just do that with an old kitchen knife or a garden knife, or here I've got a horry, and you just cut into it, separate those out, pot those on, grow them on for a little while in a pot, and then they can either be potted up in a larger pot for display or popped out into the garden. It's as easy as that. Hostas are beautiful plants to have in the garden and relatively easy to grow. However, they are also adored by slugs and snails. They'll sniff them out from miles around. And so there are some measures that you can take to prevent them from being gobbled up. I really don't like the use of any sort of chemical or pesticide in the garden. We really try and garden as sustainably and with biodiversity in mind at all times. What I do is I make a solution that is sprayed as a foliar kind of protection using garlic. So you boil up some garlic and strain it off and use that liquid when it's cool to spray over your hostas, and that I find works really, really well. Another thing that you can use to repel slugs and snails is your coffee grounds. Just save them up every time you have a coffee, just sort of sprinkle them around your hosta, and I think it's the acidity really in them that sort of repels the slugs and snails. So you just make sure you've got a good amount, good circle around your hosta. I generally find that anything that creates some sort of discomfort for the snail or slug is helpful. So that might be crushed eggshells, it could be gravel or grit, but also having them in a pot will help generally. And if you can lift your pot up and place it up on some chocks or something like that, that's going to be of additional benefit. And then you also get copper strips, which are really, really good. There's also a pelleted wool product that you can buy, so it's nice and clean and easy to use. It sort of goes around, looks a little bit like chicken pellets. You pop that around your hosta, and with the moisture they'll sort of plump up and create a fuzzy wool barrier that the slugs and snails don't like to slither on. So those are some measures that you can take to prevent the slugs and snails from getting to your hostas. But what I would say above all is to garden in a really sustainable way and just sort of encourage you to grow a wide range of species in the garden that will hopefully attract beneficial birds, animals and insects to the garden to help you combat your pest problems. So I really encourage you to give hostas a try in your garden. If you've got a shady corner, they'll add texture, colour, multi-seasonal interest and a little bit of glamour.